The morning started like any other in my quiet, over-landscaped little cul-de-sac, where nothing ever seemed to happen, but everything was silently judged. Birds chirped like clockwork, sprinklers whispered across driveways, and neighbors gave each other those half-hearted waves, friendly on the outside, indifferent underneath. I was on my front porch, sipping lukewarm coffee from my chipped #OneNeighbor mug, a gag gift from my sister that had become weirdly ironic over time. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting a soft golden hue over the pristine lawns and identical mailboxes. Everything felt perfectly still. Until she appeared. Karen. Every neighborhood has one, but ours had the deluxe edition. She strutted down the sidewalk like a suburban general inspecting her troop. Short, silver bob so precisely cut you'd think she had a live-in stylist. Massive sunglasses that made her look like a fly in designer armor. In one hand, a Starbucks venti something no one could pronounce. In the other, the infamous clipboard, black leather with color-coded tabs poking out like little flags of war. She was the queen of the cul-de-sac, and I was apparently her favorite peasant to punish. Karen wasn't just a member of the HOA board, she was the board, in spirit if not by title. Self-appointed, power-drunk, and constantly buzzing with the energy of someone who just couldn't relax. Ever since I moved in 2 years ago, she'd made it her personal mission to remind me of every possible violation in the neighborhood charter. She once left a note in my mailbox, a federal crime, by the way, because it was painted off-white instead of HOA-approved eggshell. Another time, she knocked on my door at 7 a.m. on a Sunday to inform me that my recycling bin was visible from the street. I'm not joking. Visible. From the street. Most days, I let her drama roll off me. But today wasn't most days. Because the night before, I'd come back from court, and I'd finally won. After nearly a year of arguing with my back neighbor over a disputed property line, a judge ruled in my favor. It was done. Over. Settled. Except, there was one catch. The court required me to post official survey notices along the property edge until the county's crew could come mark the new boundary. The judge even handed me a folder of brightly colored legal stickers, neon orange and electric blue, each one printed with pending survey, do not remove. So, under the cover of night, I walked the fence line with a flashlight and a roll of tape, carefully placing each notice just as ordered. It wasn't glamorous, but it was legal, and finally, it was mine. Which is why when I saw Karen strutting straight toward my fence that morning, eyes locked on one of those big orange stickers like a heat-seeking missile, my gut told me something bad was about to happen. She stopped right in front of the sign, tilted her head, and squinted, like she couldn't believe what she was seeing. Then, slowly, with a look of exaggerated disgust, she placed her latte on the grass, adjusted her sunglasses, and peeled the sticker right off. I nearly dropped my coffee. For a second, I just stood there in disbelief, staring at her like she'd just spray-painted graffiti on my garage. And then I moved. I bolted down the steps and across the yard, heart pounding. "Hey!" I shouted, louder than I meant to. She froze halfway to the next sticker. The first one was already crushed in her perfectly manicured fingers. "What are you doing?" I demanded, already out of breath. She turned around slowly, unbothered, like she hadn't just tampered with a legal document. "These things," she said, waving the crumpled sticker, "are an eyesore." "Excuse me. They violate Section 3.2.1 of the HOA's Community Aesthetic Standards," she said, as if that settled everything. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My jaw clenched. "That's a court-ordered notice." She actually laughed. "Oh sure. You can't just slap any ugly little sticker on your fence and say it's from a judge. We have standards here." I took a deep breath, trying not to snap. But deep down, I already knew. This was about to become way more than just a sticker dispute. Karen didn't care about the law. Karen cared about control. And I was about to become the first person in years to challenge her suburban throne. She stood there, fingers poised over the next sticker, like a raccoon about to dig into someone else's garbage. Except this wasn't trash. This was a legally issued, court-mandated notice. I could actually see it, this sick little glint in her eyes. She was enjoying this. Karen, I said, carefully controlling my voice, those stickers were issued by the county clerk's office. They're part of a judge's order. If you peel off even one more, you're tampering with a legal directive. She gave me a blank look, then blinked, then actually scoffed, like I'd just told her I was from the FBI and needed to see her sprinkler schedule. Oh, don't be dramatic, she said, waving her hand like she was swatting away a mosquito. I've been on the HOA board for 12 years. I know exactly what's allowed on fences and what isn't. Neon orange isn't. She sounded so smug, so absolutely convinced of her own superiority, it made my blood boil. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone, thumbs flying. Fine, I said. Let me show you something. A few swipes later, I found the photo I'd taken at the courthouse, an image of the signed judge's order, complete with the stamped seal, date, and the paragraph that spelled everything out. It even mentioned the exact language on the stickers. I held it up for her to see. She glanced at it for maybe 2 seconds, and then she waved it off. I don't care what that says, she sniffed. This is private property, and you agreed to abide by the HOA charter when you moved in. That means no stickers, no signs, and certainly nothing this hideous. I stared at her, absolutely stunned. My heart pounded in my ears. I'd expected her to be petty, maybe even to argue, but to see her blatantly disregard a court order like it was a coupon from a fake email? That was another level. Karen, I said slowly, you do realize the HOA doesn't outrank a judge, right? She crossed her arms like a stubborn child who refused to eat her vegetables. We have our own bylaws. If you don't like it, maybe you shouldn't live here. That was it. That was the final switch. I hit the record button on my phone camera and pointed it directly at her. Go ahead, I said, my tone flat. Say that again, while you tear down a court-ordered notice. I'll send this straight to the judge's clerk. And for the first time since I'd known her, Karen hesitated. Her hand froze midair. Her mouth twitched, and something flickered across her face. Maybe fear, maybe embarrassment, maybe just the realization that this time, she wasn't going to get away with it. You're being ridiculous, she huffed, but she dropped the sticker she was holding and took one small, grudging step back. I'll have to bring this up at the next board meeting, she muttered, like that was supposed to scare me. This kind of behavior, this graffiti, is unacceptable. Do that, I said. And while you're at it, you might want to talk to a lawyer. She glared at me, pure suburban venom, then spun on her heel and stomped away down the sidewalk, her clipboard flapping at her side like a battle standard. I stood there for a moment, still running hot with adrenaline, watching her vanish around the corner. Then I turned back to the fence. The sticker she'd ripped was wrinkled but still usable. I smoothed it back onto the post carefully, pressing it down like it was sacred. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. 3 days passed. And in HOA time, that's practically a decade. Word travels fast in a tightly packed, perfectly manicured suburb. I noticed the changes immediately. People were watching me differently. Some gave me the usual nods and waves, but others paused longer than usual when walking their dogs. I could feel it. They knew. Or at least, they'd heard something. The neighborhood grapevine was buzzing, and I had no doubt who'd planted the seed. Then, Friday night, the email arrived. Subject: Special HOA Board Meeting, Urgent Violation Review, Lot 14. I didn't even have to read the body to know what it was about. Karen was trying to go nuclear. She couldn't win on the street, so now she was dragging me into the one arena where she still believed she reigned supreme, the HOA clubhouse. And honestly, I was ready for her. I opened a folder and started gathering everything: court documents, photos, the time-stamped video from my phone. I even printed out the judge's order in full size and highlighted the relevant section like it was a high school debate assignment. Because if Karen wanted a fight at the board table, then I was going to bury her under so much legal paper she'd think she was back in law school, which, based on her understanding of the law, she clearly never attended. The HOA clubhouse was a beige, windowless box at the edge of the community park, designed to be both utterly forgettable and vaguely oppressive. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, folding chairs were arranged in stiff rows, and a table up front had been covered with a sad plastic tablecloth, as if someone expected a bake sale to break out mid-meeting. I walked in with my folder tucked under my arm and a quiet fire building in my chest. Karen was already there, of course, seated at the head of the long table like she was presiding over a city council hearing. She wore a cream-colored blouse, a string of pearls, and an expression that could cut granite. Flanking her were the other board members, two prim women who looked like carbon copies of Karen, minus the menace, and one older man in khakis who looked like he'd rather be watching golf. The room quieted as I took a seat. Karen leaned into her microphone like it was a courtroom mic, cleared her throat dramatically, and said, "We have an urgent violation to discuss tonight regarding Lot 14. Every head turned. Some eyes widened. Others narrowed. I could feel the judgment thick in the air. Karen stood, clipboard in hand, and began passing around photos, pictures she must have taken after our front yard standoff. They showed the neon orange and blue stickers in full view, pasted onto my fence posts like radioactive stamp. "As you can see," she said, pointing dramatically at each photo, "these garish items deface the otherwise harmonious appearance of our community. These are not HOA-sanctioned materials. They are disruptive, unsightly, and in clear violation of Section 3.2.1 of the HOA's aesthetic standards." I bit my tongue. Karen flipped to a new page. I took it upon myself to remove one of these unsightly items. Several people in the room shifted in their chairs, but was met with hostility by the resident. I now formally propose that the board issue a violation notice and begin accruing daily fines for non-compliance until the stickers are removed. She ended her speech with a proud little nod and took her seat like she'd just delivered closing arguments in a murder trial. I stood slowly, letting the silence stretch. "Before anyone votes," I said, voice calm but clear, "I think it's important you see this." I walked up to the board table and began distributing copies of the court order. Each one had the judge's signature, the clerk's stamp, and the highlighted section that spelled out the requirement to post legal survey notices along the property line. "These aren't random stickers," I said, turning to face the room. "They were issued by the county court and are part of a legally binding order. If they're removed, it's not just an HOA matter anymore. It's contempt of court." One of the women adjusted her glasses and started reading. The man in khakis frowned at Karen. "Did you know about this?" Karen's jaw tightened. "Well, he says they're legal, but—" I cut her off. "No. I showed you the order 3 days ago. You laughed and peeled the sticker off anyway." I reached into my folder and pulled out a printout of the still frame from my video, Karen's hand gripping the sticker, mid-rip, while I filmed. I didn't even have to show the video. The image alone said everything. Karen opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Nothing came out but a faint clicking sound. The room was silent. Finally, the woman with the glasses cleared her throat and said, "It seems Lot 14 is in compliance with a court directive. We can't override that." Karen sputtered. "Well, be that as it may, the aesthetic doesn't trump a judge's order," I said flatly. "Unless the HOA wants to be on the hook for fines and legal consequences." Karen's face went pale. She stared at the table like it had betrayed her. The woman turned to her fellow board members. "Does anyone second the motion for a violation notice?" Silence. The man in khakis coughed into his hand. The two women shook their heads. Karen said nothing. Her motion died. I sat down, suppressing a grin. For the first time since I'd moved in, Karen had lost in front of her kingdom. But I knew better than to celebrate. Not yet. Because Karen wasn't the kind of person to let go gracefully. She was the type to double down, dig in, and come back with something worse. Sure enough, as the meeting wrapped up and people began filing out, she leaned toward me and whispered, "This isn't finished." I didn't reply. Just smiled and walked past her. But as I stepped out into the warm night air, one thought lingered. She's not finished. Which meant I'd better not be either. For 3 glorious days, peace returned to my corner of the cul-de-sac. The stickers remained untouched, the lawn stayed mowed, and even Karen's yappy little dog stopped barking at me through the fence. I started to think, maybe, that the confrontation at the HOA meeting had finally settled things. That maybe, just maybe, Karen had backed off. I should have known better. It was a Tuesday morning when the email arrived, subject line, "Urgent, special HOA session." I opened it while sipping my coffee, expecting another complaint about grass length or the placement of my trash bins. Instead, I found a bombshell. The board was calling an emergency vote to introduce a new amendment to the HOA charter. No signage of any kind may be displayed on fences, regardless of legal status, unless expressly approved by the board. I choked on my coffee. She wasn't just trying to get the stickers removed. Karen was trying to rewrite the rules, just to get at me. I scanned the email again. The vote was set for Thursday evening. Just 48 hours. No public comments allowed. Just board members. A quiet ambush, disguised in bylaws and bureaucracy. But she forgot one thing. I knew the rules, too. I pulled out the HOA charter, flipping to the section I'd practically memorized during my last fight with Karen. And there it was, clear as day. All emergency amendments must be accompanied by proof of necessity and may not override standing county, state, or federal mandates. In other words, you can't outvote a judge. But I couldn't rely on logic alone. Karen didn't play fair. She played dirty. So I needed to do more than show up, I needed to show out. Thursday night. The HOA clubhouse was buzzing with quiet tension. Word had spread, and a small crowd of residents had gathered just outside, murmuring, sipping lukewarm coffee, and wondering what the emergency was all about. Inside, the board sat with stiff expressions. Karen, once again at the helm, was practically vibrating with anticipation. Her stack of notes sat beside her, her laptop open, and a smug smile crept at the corners of her mouth. I walked in holding my own stack of papers, laptop under my arm, phone ready. The meeting began. Karen wasted no time. We're here tonight to discuss a necessary update to our community appearance guidelines. We believe this amendment will preserve the aesthetic integrity of our neighborhood and... I raised a hand. Karen paused, blinking. You are not a board member, Mr. Redacted, and you do not have the floor. Actually, I said, flipping open the charter, under Section 7.4.2, any homeowner directly affected by a proposed rule change may request 3 minutes to speak before a vote. Karen's lips thinned into a line. The other board members looked confused, but none objected. She waved a hand. Fine. 3 minutes. I stood. My stickers aren't decorations. They're not slogans, political signs, or advertisements. They are legally required survey markers issued by a judge as part of a court-ordered property resolution. I held up a copy of the ruling again. Removing them would not just violate my rights. It would violate the law. I placed a copy in front of each board member. Second, I continued, this proposed amendment, while clever, cannot override a legal mandate. You can't just write HOA rules that contradict the law of the land. And if you do, the HOA opens itself up to legal liability. The room shifted again, board members exchanged glances. But I wasn't done. I pulled out a new sheet of paper and slid it across the table. What's this? Karen snapped. An affidavit from the county zoning office, I said, confirming that any tampering with official survey notices constitutes interference with court-mandated property demarcations. Karen paled. And finally, I said, projecting my voice so the people gathered outside could hear, This isn't about stickers. It's about a pattern of harassment. A personal vendetta. A few gasps sounded from the hallway. I turned to the board. This woman has fined me for mailbox paint, recycling bin placement, and lawn height. Now that she's lost in court, she's trying to twist the HOA rules to punish me again. I paused, then delivered the final blow. And just so we're clear, I held up my phone. This entire speech is being recorded. And it will be forwarded to my attorney, along with a copy of tonight's agenda, in case the board votes to move forward with this illegal amendment. Silence. Then the man in khakis, Mr. Harold, I'd learned, cleared his throat. I move that we table this amendment until legal counsel can review it. Seconded. Carried. Motion died. Again. Karen didn't speak. She didn't even look up. But I saw it. That tightness around her eyes. That tremble in her lips. For the second time, she'd been beaten at her own game. And this time, it wasn't even close. I thought she'd be done. After 2 failed attempts, first the sticker snatch, then the botched boardroom ambush, any rational person would have waved the white flag. But Karen? Karen wasn't rational. Karen was the HOA's self-declared protector of community standards, and she wasn't about to let a little legality stop her from getting the last word. And she would get it, with one final, infuriating, illegal act. It was a Friday evening. I was barbecuing in the backyard, flipping burgers while humming along to a classic rock playlist. The sun was just beginning to set, casting golden light across the freshly cut grass. My fence, complete with its ugly, court-ordered stickers, stood proudly at the back of my yard like a silent guardian. Then I heard it. I turned slowly. There she was, Karen, on my side of the fence. Not standing near it. Not just peeking over my property. Holding a garden scraper in one hand and a crumpled, torn sticker in the other. My first instinct wasn't rage. It was disbelief. This woman had marched onto my property, trespassed across a surveyed line, and torn down a legally required marker. "Are you out of your mind?" I shouted. Karen jumped back, startled, but she didn't look scared. No, she looked satisfied. "These stickers are ruining the neighborhood's image," she said, brushing imaginary dust off her khaki pants. "If the board won't act, I will." I grabbed my phone and started filming. She rolled her eyes. "Go ahead. What, are you going to sue me again?" I gave her a smile colder than the iced tea I'd left on the patio. "Actually," I said, "you've just violated 3 laws." She opened her mouth, but I kept going. 1. Trespassing, caught on video. 2. Tampering with a court-ordered boundary marker, a misdemeanor, by the way. And 3. Criminal damage to property. Her confidence wavered. "You're being dramatic," she said, but her voice had lost its edge. "No, Karen," I said calmly, "you're going to jail." The police arrived 15 minutes later. She tried to spin her usual web of suburban nonsense, claiming she thought the fence line wasn't official, that she had verbal permission from the board, that she was just cleaning up community blight. It didn't work. Because this time, I had video, documents, and legal precedent on my side. And the cops? They'd had enough of HOA nonsense for 1 week. Karen was cited on the spot for criminal trespass and destruction of property. She wasn't handcuffed, though I could tell it bruised her ego more that the neighbors were watching from across the cul-de-sac as she was read her citation and told to appear in court. That night, the group chat exploded. Turns out, I wasn't the only one Karen had harassed over the years. There were stories of fines for wind chimes, threats over garden gnomes, and even a cease and desist letter for someone repainting their garage. One neighbor even joked, "Is this the moment the HOA finally turns on their queen?" I replied, "The queen just lost her crown." The next morning, I installed new stickers. Bigger, brighter, bolder. And directly underneath them, a laminated copy of the court ruling, signed and notarized. Then, just for fun, I printed out a photo of Karen trespassing from the video footage and placed it beside the sticker. No caption. Just her, midrip, caught in the act. A little petty? Maybe. But after everything, I figured I'd earned one final, silent mic drop. Later that week, the HOA sent out a new newsletter. For the first time in 5 years, it wasn't written by Karen. Instead, it was a general notice thanking residents for respecting legal boundaries, reminding everyone of the rules around property disputes, and introducing a newly elected compliance committee. Translation: Karen had been voted out. No more clipboards. No more surprise inspections. No more neighborhood tyranny disguised as concern. Just peace, property lines, and my ugly stickers. Mini-loop callback. She was the queen of the cul-de-sac. But this time, the peasants revolted. The silence was weird. 4 years, I'd been used to Karen's footsteps patrolling the block like a mall cop with a vendetta. Her emails, her notes, her glare from behind those oversized sunglasses that somehow always caught the light just right to blind you. Now, gone. No notes. No warnings. No complaints about the way I coiled my hose. It was as if someone had lifted a heavy quilt of tension from the entire neighborhood. The kind you don't even realize is there until it's finally gone. I walked to my mailbox one morning, wearing my old college hoodie, socks with sandals, and carrying a cup of coffee, fully expecting someone to comment on the violation of suburban fashion. Nothing. Instead, I got a thumbs up from Mr. Thompson next door, who hadn't spoken more than 10 words to me in 5 years. "Good to see someone finally put her in her place," he said, tipping his head toward Karen's house. I grinned. "Just doing my part for democracy." He chuckled, then leaned closer. "Between you and me, we're all grateful. Those stickers might be ugly, but they're the most beautiful thing I've seen on this street in a decade." The neighborhood began to change. Not drastically, but meaningfully. People started chatting more. Kids rode bikes down the sidewalks again. One guy repainted his garage door neon blue, and no one blinked. And me? I became, well, kind of a local legend. They called me the sticker guy. One neighbor even asked if I'd speak at the next HOA meeting, to discuss residents' rights in the face of overreach. I politely declined, but offered to bring snacks. The best part? Karen's house went up for sale 2 weeks later. No explanation. No farewell party. Just a discreet for sale sign and an overpriced Zillow listing with the phrase, "charming and compliant neighborhood." With Karen gone and the HOA committee, now run by actual reasonable adults, I decided it was time to embrace my newfound legacy. I ordered a custom lawn sign. Black and gold. Bold letters. Legally ugly, proudly free. I planted it right next to the sticker on my fence. Beneath it, I added a QR code that linked to a Dropbox folder containing the court ruling, footage of Karen ripping the sticker, HOA bylaws, and a folder titled, "Know Your Property Rights." Within a week, it had over 700 views. Apparently, even people outside our suburb were watching the saga unfold. One morning, I got a letter in the mail. Handwritten. No return address. Inside was a simple note. "Thank you. You stood up for what's right. Some of us were too scared to. You weren't. A grateful neighbor." I'd be lying if I said it didn't hit me in the chest. Because in the beginning, I hadn't planned on becoming anything. I just wanted my damn fence line respected. But somehow, standing up to Karen's brand of petty tyranny had become something bigger. 1 month later, I was back in my backyard, sipping lemonade and watching the sunset. My fence stood strong. My stickers gleamed under the fading light. Then I noticed a young couple, new neighbors, walking past. They stopped, stared at the stickers, then looked at my house. The guy pointed and whispered something. Then he gave me a thumbs up. I raised my glass and nodded. That was the thing about neighborhoods. They're not just lawns and fences. They're made of people. And sometimes the people have to remind each other what freedom and respect really look like. Mini call to action. If you've ever dealt with an overbearing HOA, a nosy neighbor, or someone who thought their clipboard made them a cop, know this: you're not alone. Stand your ground. Know your rights. And if you need to, slap on a legally ugly sticker and let the world know. This is my property, and I'm not backing down. Mini loop callback. She was the queen of the cul-de-sac. But this peasant? He built his kingdom on truth, law, and a little bit of ugly vinyl.